Dear friends, subscribe to my channel, Viral Story Hub.
Oh, thanks. Don't miss the stories.
The courtroom was so silent it felt heavy, like even the air was afraid to move, while all eyes stayed locked on the maid. She hadn't slept all night. Fear sat in her eyes, as if the whole world had chosen her as guilty without mercy. The judge looked cold and distant, fingers resting on a file that carried a decision able to crush her entire life. People in the back whispered softly, the kind of whispers that say, someone has already been judged poor and wrong. The maid kept saying she did nothing, but her weak voice fell apart before reaching anyone who truly mattered there. Her clothes were old, hands shaking, head lowered, as if poverty itself had entered the courtroom as the real crime. The judge said, "The evidence is clear." And in that moment, it felt like everyone heard the sound of her hope break. Among the crowd sat a young girl, breathing fast, her small face tight with fear, anger, and something else, truth. She belonged to a rich family, yet there was no pride on her face, only the heavy weight of something she knew. She looked at her mother for support, but her mother lowered her eyes, like truth was too expensive to speak today. The judge signaled the guard to take the maid away, and her legs nearly gave out as the world blurred around her. Then suddenly the young girl stood up from her seat, stepping forward, and the entire courtroom seemed to stop breathing. The sound of the girl's small footsteps echoed through the courtroom, each step cutting through the heavy silence. People stared in confusion, wondering why a rich family's daughter was walking forward during such a serious moment. The judge frowned, clearly annoyed at being interrupted, but there was something steady and fearless in her eyes. In her hand she held a phone tightly, like that small device carried a truth too big for the room to ignore. She stopped where the judge could see her clearly, and every person there leaned forward, afraid to even breathe. The maid slowly lifted her head, a tiny spark of hope flickering in her tear-filled eyes for the first time. The girl's voice was soft but firm. "Sir, you are about to punish the wrong person," she said with courage. A ripple moved through the courtroom. Chairs creaked as people straightened, sensing the story turning suddenly. The judge asked sharply, "Do you understand what you're saying?" But for the first time, doubt hid in his tone. She nodded, her finger hovering over the screen, heart racing, but her decision stronger than her fear. Her mother tried to stop her with her eyes but said nothing, because stopping the truth can cost more than silence. Then the girl raised her phone toward the court and said, "Everything is recorded here. This shows what really happened." The courtroom fell into a deeper silence, the kind that comes when people feel history about to change. All eyes fixed on the phone screen, as if that small light held someone's future, someone's freedom. The judge's face was no longer as firm. A faint tension appeared, something he could not fully hide. The girl pressed play, her hands trembling, yet her courage stood stronger than the fear shaking inside her. The video showed the house living room, the same day, the same time when the maid was accused of stealing. From the camera angle, everything looked clear, and people leaned forward, afraid to miss even a second. The maid appeared in the frame, walking toward the kitchen, her hands empty, her face calm and unaware. Then another figure entered the screen, and the girl's mother suddenly covered her mouth in shock. It was a family relative, someone trusted by all, someone no one had ever thought to question. In the video, he opened the cabinet, took the jewelry box, and quickly hid it inside his coat. A gasp spread through the courtroom. People looked at each other, truth hitting like a sudden storm. The judge's hand froze on the file, and the color slowly drained from his face as reality closed in. The judge quickly ordered the video to be stopped, but it was too late. The truth had already filled the room. His throat went dry, fingers stiff against the file, control slipping away in front of everyone watching him. The prosecutor tried to speak, but no clear words came out, because the footage had already said enough. People in the back were no longer staring at the maid. Now their eyes were fixed on the man with the power. The girl's mother began to cry softly, realizing silence had been her biggest mistake all along. The maid stood with folded hands, her whole body shaking, yet a faint light of relief began to appear. The judge asked for water, his voice weaker now, pride breaking under the weight of visible truth. The video was played again, and this time every second felt louder, clearer, impossible to deny. The relative's face was recognized, and a police officer nodded, confirming the identity without hesitation. The court clerk wrote quickly because the story had turned, and every word now carried serious weight. The young girl stood still, chest rising fast, as if she had carried a burden far heavier than her age. The judge gripped the arm of his chair, and for the first time, regret was clearly visible in his eyes. The judge took a long breath and looked at the maid, the woman he had almost sent to prison without doubt. In that moment, he felt the weight of how one rushed decision could bury an innocent life in darkness. The atmosphere had shifted. People now looked at the bench of justice not with trust, but with hard questions. The prosecutor quietly admitted the new evidence changed everything, though confidence was gone from his voice. A police officer stepped forward, confirming the video was clear and the real thief had been identified. The maid broke down crying, tears falling fast, years of fear and humiliation pouring out all at once. The girl turned back and met the maid's eyes, a silent exchange of gratitude passing between them. The judge touched his face slowly, shame rising, realizing how close he had come to destroying her life. He ordered the guard to step back and announced the maid was to be released immediately. No charges. A murmur spread across the room, people reminded in that moment that being poor is not a crime. The girl's mother hugged her tightly, tears in her eyes, pride and regret mixing painfully in her heart. But the story was not over, because inside the judge, a heavy guilt had only just begun to grow. The judge straightened in his chair and pulled the microphone closer, the room sensing something serious coming. He admitted he had reviewed the evidence too quickly and nearly condemned an innocent woman without care. His voice had lost its authority, replaced by regret that trembled through every word he forced out. The maid stood quietly, hands still shaking, her body not yet free from the fear she had just survived. Looking at her, the judge said, "Today, this court owes you an apology," and the room fell into shock. Many people lowered their eyes because powerful men rarely bow their heads after making such mistakes. The young girl released a deep breath, the heavy pressure on her small heart finally beginning to lift. Her mother held her hand tightly, pride now stronger than the fear that had once kept her silent. Police brought the real thief forward, his head down, confidence gone, exposed by a simple truth. Tears still filled the maid's eyes, but now they carried dignity returning, not just pain leaving. The judge ordered the record to show the accusation was false, and the maid was fully cleared. Yet one thought stayed in his mind: how many others suffer quietly without someone brave enough to stand? The courtroom emptied, but the impact of that day stayed behind, carved deeply into every heart present. The maid stepped outside into sunlight, and for the first time in days, the light felt like mercy, not fear. She bent slightly and blessed the young girl, praying her life would always stand on the side of truth. The girl hugged her tightly, as if both their pains understood each other without needing any words. Her mother stood nearby in tears, realizing money means nothing if courage and honesty are missing at home. The judge remained seated alone for a long time, the closed file before him, but his conscience wide open. He understood a verdict is never just ink on paper. It writes directly onto human lives forever. The real thief was led away, his lowered head reminding everyone that lies cannot hide forever. People returned home, but the video and that moment stayed alive in their minds as a lasting lesson. That night, the girl looked at her phone, amazed how something so small had saved a whole life. The maid prayed before sleeping, remembering not the court, but the pure heart of the child who spoke. Sometimes truth arrives in a small voice, but when it rises, even the powerful are forced to bow. By the next morning, the whole city was talking about how a young girl stood up and changed someone's fate. The video spread everywhere online, but it wasn't just viral. It was waking up something in people's hearts. The maid sat in her small home, yet for the first time, she felt her dignity was safe and truly seen. Her son sat beside her, holding her hand, like the shadow of fear that lived there was slowly fading away. She kept thinking if that girl had stayed silent, her home, her family, everything could have been destroyed. At school, other children looked at the girl with quiet respect, but her face carried calm, not pride. Her teacher praised her gently, saying real education is standing for truth even when it feels scary. At home, her mother hugged her longer than usual, the wall of silence between them finally gone. In his office, the judge sat alone and began writing his resignation, his heart too heavy to ignore. He realized power without justice becomes another form of harm, no matter how official it looks. The real change didn't happen only in court, but in minds learning that even the poor deserve to be heard. From that day on, people said it wasn't just a phone that won, it was the courage of a child's heart.